Forced into marriage with a merciless farmer, she made an incredible choice that transformed her. Sarah Thompson's heart sank as she stared at the reflection in the dusty farmhouse window. The sun cast long shadows behind her, stretching her figure like the heavy weight of her impending marriage to Hank, a man known for his mercilessness. Was this really where her dreams would end? Just a few miles away, the dense forest behind the conservation site glimmered with the promise of a future she dreamed of since childhood. A wildlife biologist, clear skies, and endless opportunity. Yet here she was, shackled by an arrangement enforced by her family, feeling like a prisoner in the life they tailored for her. As her fingers brushed against the weathered surface of the window frame, memories flashed before her. Family dinners filled with laughter, and her father's fervent stories of perseverance against all odds. But as each recollection broke into fragments, she felt the nostalgia cut like glass, sharp and painful. Her father would have never permitted this marriage, but she was bound by loyalty, a steadfast loyalty taught since childhood. The thought of disappointing her family twisted in her gut, a constant reminder that their legacy depended on her sacrifice. Behind Hank's charming facade lay a darker truth, a relentlessness that gathered shadows within the fields. The conversations she overheard, the desperate whispers of farmhands edged with fear, clung to her as tightly as the chains of her engagement ring. Every harsh word from Hank felt like a tightening noose around her aspirations. She was drowning in a swamp of regret, haunted by the question, was she betraying her family's honor by wanting something different? Unsure and frightened, Sarah reached for her phone that night, her fingers trembling. Dr. Emily Hayes, her former professor, had always believed in her vision. The conversation spilled out like bottled emotion, and within moments of Emily's presence in the bustling coffee shop, Sarah felt that spark reignite. You have the passion, Sarah. Don't let it burn out. There's a conservation program nearby searching for field workers, Emily encouraged, and for the first time, hope spilled over the edges of her despair. Yet moments later, reality crashed back down around her. Before she could act on the glimmer of hope, Hank's shadow loomed closer. His threats felt like a storm gathering strength, every ounce of fear coiling around her heart. You're bound by that contract, he growled, reminding her of the web they had woven during the arrangement. Can a piece of paper truly dictate her future? The thought was venomous, simmering, festering inside her like a tormenting question. She could either honor her sacrifices or grasp at the very essence of who she wished to become. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving only a haze of orange in the sky, Sarah stood before Hank, her heart racing as doubt clashed with fury. Could she honor the legacy that shaped her, or break free from the web of expectations? Questions tore at her insides, leaving her unsteady. The thought of breaking ties with her family's vision felt like a betrayal she wasn't sure she could survive. But deep within her, in the suffocating darkness of doubt, flickered the possibility of liberation, her dreams stubbornly refusing to be extinguished. The air thickened with unspoken words, a charged atmosphere lodged in her throat, choking her resolve. Would she step forward, confront Hank, and accept the undeniable truth of her dreams, or shrink back into the comforting arms of family loyalty, surrendering her spirit to an anguished fate? This fateful evening, teetering on the edge of forever, held the weight of her destiny. She was poised for a choice that threatened to eclipse all she had known and redefined who she could become, uncertainty lingering like the remnants of a storm yet to pass. The few moments that followed felt like an eternity, each silent beat a reminder of everything Sarah stood to lose. Hank's presence loomed larger, distorting the air around them as she struggled to muster the courage to voice the tumult within her. Her mind raced. She had reached a crossroads where the familiar paths of family duty and personal aspiration collided. "Sarah," he began, breaking the silence with a voice dripping with a demand she had grown to dread, "you need to understand what this means. You're making a commitment that has nothing to do with you and everything to do with the legacy our family's built." His eyes darkened, and she sensed the weight of his words pressing against her. It was a high-stakes game of power he seemed determined to control. And yet, as she grappled with his threats, a seed of defiance took root within her. Emily's words echoed, the passionate encouragement reminding her of a truth she had tried so hard to stifle. She was born to be free and to chase the winds of her dreams. "Legacy?" she managed to respond, her voice steady despite the tremors beneath. "What you call legacy feels more like a prison. I can't live my life for others anymore." The realization hit her with the force of a summer storm, powerful and electrifying. For the first time, she felt her own voice wrap around her thoughts, wrapping them in a newfound certainty. Hank's expression shifted, surprise flickering like candlelight across his features. Would he read her resolve as rebellion, or was this the crack in his veneer he had never anticipated? The thought bolstered her courage, and she continued, "I've sacrificed enough. My dreams are not yours to control." The confrontation felt surreal, a sharp contrast to her usual timid demeanor. Each word was a small step toward reclaiming her narrative, but a flicker of fear remained. Hank was known for his cruelty, and confronting him could yield unforeseen consequences. She had seen the anger behind closed doors, the quickness to lash out when he felt cornered. Desperation surged within her. The urge to escape this cycle of fear and confinement ignited her blood. But how? Her mind raced as she considered the vast wilderness that called her, the trees that stood strong and tall, rising against the winds that sought to bend them. If only she too could find the strength of those trees. Days turned into razor-thin moments, and Sarah spent her evenings researching the wildlife program Emily had mentioned. Her fingers glided over the keyboard, absorbing every detail about the conservation efforts. With each line read, she felt a radiant warmth push away the winter chill of doubt. However, peaceful moments soon morphed into restless nights spent practicing what she would say to Hank when he inevitably confronted her about her ambitions. Each time she rehearsed in front of the mirror, amplifying the conviction in her voice, she found resilience rising within her. But the storm brewing inside Hank was undeniable. When she finally gathered the strength to share her dreams with him, tension electrified the air. Instead of retreating, she planted her feet firmly as she faced him, facing the man she had believed held the reins to her fate. "Tomorrow," she declared, her voice unwavering, "I will apply for that position. I owe it to myself and to the memory of my father." Her resolve, fierce and undeniable, was anchored by the clarity of her purpose. What would Hank do? The silence that followed was thick with tension, his eyes narrowing. Too many unanswered questions swirled between them, their fates now intertwined and uncertain. Would he retaliate, clinging to the contract that was supposed to bind her? Or had she pushed him too far, forcing him to confront the possibility that she was no longer a pawn in his game? A flicker of anticipation fired in Sarah's chest, accompanied by the pulse of fear and exhilaration. She was finally stepping into the light, and the intensity of what lay ahead was about to rupture the surface like a long-buried secret. Perhaps she was ready to face whatever came next, or perhaps she would make a discovery about herself that altered everything. Tomorrow could shift the foundation of her choices. And just as the resolve hung like mist in the air, a deft knock echoed through the stillness of the farmhouse, a reminder that the course of her action would soon be lit with consequences. Who could it be? The momentum of Sarah's conviction shifted abruptly at the sound of that knock. Her heart pounded as she exchanged uneasy glances with the familiar wooden walls of the farmhouse, which suddenly felt like they were closing in. She had spent the last few days savoring the thought of liberation. Now, the stark reality of confrontation pressed against her. "Stay here," Sarah murmured to herself, more a directive for her nerves than anyone else, as she approached the door. She hesitated, the weight of her emotions threatening to pull her under. Was it an ally, or another adversary waiting on the other side? With a deep breath, she steadied her trembling hands and opened the door, revealing Emily, eyes alight with urgency. "What happened? Are you okay?" Emily's voice was low, but the concern radiating from her pierced through the tension in the air. Sarah beckoned her inside, closing the door behind them, the latch clicking shut with a definite finality. No more hesitation. I told him I'd apply for the wildlife program tomorrow, she said, the words tumbling out like a secret kept too long. Emily's eyebrows shot up in surprise. You did? That's amazing. Did he react? Let's just say there was a lot of silence. I think I shocked him, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. But I'm ready for it. I've been practicing what I want to say. Practicing? You mean you were planning this all along? Emily leaned in closer, intrigue flashing through her. Yes, and it felt fantastic to finally stand my ground. But Sarah's resolve momentarily wavered, shadowed by the memory of Hank's stone-cold demeanor. What if he retaliates? What if he tries to sabotage my application? Then you'll show him that you're not to be underestimated. You're no longer a puppet in his game, Emily said firmly. You have to believe in yourself. As they settled at the kitchen table, Sarah laid out her fears, more immediate and tangible now that the prospect of control loomed larger than ever. Each concern she confessed seemed to dissolve in the open air. Hank's potential wrath, her own dwindling confidence. Do you realize how strong you've become? Emily pressed. You're taking back your life, and that's not just about the application, it's about everything. Have you thought about who you are outside of this drama? I'm still figuring that out, Sarah admitted, the weight of reflection pressing against her. Before all this, I was just Hank's fiancé, someone who bent to everyone else's will. Now I can't even recognize that part of myself. Emily hesitated for a moment, contemplating her friend's transformation. Then use that realization. Attack the doubt like it's Hank confronting you. What do you want at your core? This isn't merely about getting a job, it's about your identity. With those words, clarity began to settle into Sarah. It wasn't just the application, it was stepping into her truth, breaking free from years of inherited expectations that threatened to drown her spirit. The conversation turned, momentum building with each shared thought. With Emily's help, Sarah devised a plan to confront not just Hank, but also the landscape of her own self-doubt. She would prepare meticulously for the upcoming interview, knowing that every step was a statement against the life laid out before her. That night, Sarah found herself retracing her thoughts in a different light. Each decision she had made thus far echoed through her as if unveiling a new layer of herself. As she practiced her speech in front of the mirror again, she felt the growing urgency of her transformation grind like stones under her feet, firm and resolute. The next morning, she awoke with the intensity of her ambition frothing at the edges of her consciousness. Today marked the beginning of her authenticity reclaiming ground, but just as she was about to put her plan into action, her phone buzzed ominously on the table. It was a message from Hank, the glare of the screen illuminating the anxious fears she had fought to suppress. "We need to talk," it read, simple yet laden with threat. The message dripped with implications, shattering the morning's peace and sending a fresh wave of dread curling through her. Could her newfound resolve withstand whatever confrontation lay ahead? Or would Hank's machinations prove stronger than her ambition? The tension spiraled within her as she weighed her choices, dismiss him and stay the course, or face him head-on, risking everything she had gathered inside. Heart racing, Sarah stared at the screen, the words, "We need to talk," gnawing at her stamina. It felt like a tether pulling her back into a past she had narrowly escaped from. This unexpected message thrust her into a whirl of thoughts. Could she allow Hank back into her mind at this pivotal moment of her fight for autonomy? She caught her reflection in the window, dark shadows beneath her eyes contrasting her determined demeanor. "I can't go back," she whispered, her voice steadying as she spoke the words aloud. The stakes were higher than ever, and she needed to harness the courage Emily had emboldened in her. As the minutes ticked on, Sarah weighed her options, flipping through past experiences with Hank. Each memory was colored with shades of restraint and manipulation, a scrapbook of everything she vowed to leave behind. But confronting him could also mean confronting her greatest fears. What if he wove his way back into her life, playing on her insecurities? Panic nibbled at her resolve. She didn't want to be that person again. Yet if she ignored the message, what kind of message would that send? Ignorance? Defeat? She needed strategy. Each potential outcome trained her mind toward one resolute goal: destruction of the old Sarah. she began to jot down notes, outlining what she would say to Hank should she choose to meet him. With each bullet point, she felt a rising tide of confidence flood through her. "I deserve to be free," she penned, circling the words. Determined to execute a plan, Sarah stood tall and inhaled deeply. The gravity of this moment conflicted with a flicker of excitement. Was she truly taking the wheel in her life after so long? She set her phone to respond but paused, fingers hovering over the screen. Was she truly prepared for whatever confrontation lay ahead? "Let's arrange a time to meet," she finally typed, hitting send and watching the little dots bounce as Hank received her message. It felt like stepping onto a tightrope, balance wavering between fear and empowerment. The day stretched awkwardly as she anticipated Hank's reply. In the meantime, Sarah immersed herself in preparing for the wildlife program application, researching the wildlife conservation efforts that had ignited her passion. Each fact she absorbed about animal behavior and habitat preservation invigorated her spirit. This was more than just a job. It was a lifeline, a chance to redefine her existence. By the time her phone buzzed again, she was lost in thoughts of the wildlife program, imagining herself in the field, working alongside nature. "Tonight at 7, read Hank's message. Simple enough, poised and cunning. With her resolve solidified, she envisioned the meeting in her mind. The exchange wouldn't be about submission, it would affirm her growth. As she finished preparing her resume, making sure every detail reflected her dedication to her newfound passion, she felt an electric surge within her. The girl who once floundered in whispers and shadows was ready to emerge. As evening approached, Sarah dressed cautiously, donning a simple yet elegant outfit that embodied her renewed self, symbolic of both the strength she'd gained and the woman she was striving to become. She knew what she had to do. This was her opportunity to define the terms of her relationship with Hank. Yet as she drove to their rendezvous, a gnawing doubt crept in, weaving through her confidence. What if tonight revealed weaknesses she hadn't anticipated? What if Hank countered her newfound resolve with manipulative finesse she'd not seen coming? As she parked outside the familiar diner, she swallowed hard, pushing down the churn of anxiety. The air was thick with unresolved emotions, every step toward the entrance reverberating with the weight of her decision. Inhaling sharply before stepping inside, she didn't just walk into the diner, she strode toward the precipice of her own fate. The moment was ripe with truth, pregnant with the potential of her future. But would she claim it? Or would old habits emerge in this fight for control? The door swung open, and as she crossed the threshold, she steeled herself, aware that the time had come to face the man who had long dictated the terms of her existence. Would she challenge him, or succumb to the patterns she had been trying to escape? As his gaze fixed upon her, she felt the suffocating tension of choice pulse within her. Decisions were about to be made, and each carried the weight of her past. Would she buckle under his pressure, or would she lay the groundwork for a new beginning? The diner was dimly lit, the neon sign outside casting a flickering glow that felt almost ominous as Sarah stepped inside. The clattering of plates and distant chatter formed a familiar backdrop, yet everything felt foreign as she strode towards Hank, who was already seated, his gaze fixed on her with an intensity that felt both unnerving and unyielding. "Glad you could make it," he said, his voice smooth, laced with an undertone that suggested he had anticipated this moment far more than she'd like to believe. "Let's get to it," Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. She sat down, arranging her thoughts as if they were files on a desk, neatly categorized, but somehow still overwhelming. "Did you get my message?" he continued, leaning back in his chair, confident and relaxed as though he bore no responsibility for the emotional storm brewing within her. "I did," she replied, maintaining steady eye contact. Memories clawed their way to the surface, Hank's charm, his easy ability to manipulate emotions while feigning concern. This wasn't the same girl who let those feelings cloud her judgment. It wouldn't be easy, but she had built a fortress of determination around her resolve. Fingers tapping on the laminated table, she shifted her approach. "I want to discuss what happened between us. Sarah, can we not dwell on the past? What matters is the present." There it was, the allure disguised as concern, his tone deceptively inviting. Yet as those words escaped his lips, an image of what she used to be flashed through her mind, the young woman who hung on to Hank's every word, who craved validation rather than agency. "No, we must." "Must we?" He arched a brow, arrogance dripping from his voice. "We could just rebuild." Rebuilding involved an approval and acceptance that she couldn't afford to grant. "You misunderstand. I am not here to reconcile. I'm here to draw boundaries. I've worked hard to regain my strength, and I won't allow you to walk back in and dismantle what I've built." The tension was palpable. For a moment, uncertainty flared within her. Had she strayed too far from the delicate dance they once performed? But instead of shrinking back, she admired the flicker of hesitation that crossed his face, a crack in the facade of control. "Isn't that a bit harsh?" he mused, feigning a hurt expression that she recognized as mere theatrics. "It's necessary," she asserted, leaning forward. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with empowerment. "I'm not the girl you can manipulate anymore. I've found my passion, and I refuse to compromise my future." Intrigued by the fire in her voice, Hank leaned in, curiosity mingling with arrogance. "What do you think, Sarah? Will a minor confrontation grant you freedom? You need to remember, you're not the only one who's grown." That remark stung, a reminder of the past that clung to her ambitions. "I am aware of who I was and what I'm capable of becoming, but I won't be co-opted again." His smirk faltered slightly. For a brief moment, she caught a glimpse of the insecurities he liked to keep buried. The awareness that he wasn't in control electrified Sarah's confidence. The space between them crackled, thick with their histories and unspoken truths. In this moment, Sarah knew she was fighting for more than just herself. She was contending for every woman who had ever felt trapped or constricted by someone else's definition of love. "Do you consider that growth?" He shot back abruptly, but his tone no longer carried the same confidence. It was a desperate ploy to regain the upper hand. "It's not up to you to define my growth," Sarah replied, her voice unwavering. Each word was a stone tossed into the stagnant waters of their relationship, creating ripples of change. As the unsettling silence settled, she examined Hank's face closely. What once appeared to be control now looked more like uncertainty. Did he even recognize how swiftly she had transformed? The momentary triumph fueled her, far from the person who had once cowered under his gaze. But a lingering doubt still flickered. She had put ideals into words, but would she maintain them? Then bursting through her thoughts, an audacious thought. What if she truly had the power? Fighting back was thrilling. She was rewriting her script, but the ending remained unwritten. Would the stakes escalate? Would Hank fight back, or would he fade quietly? It seemed too much lay ahead. The taste of uncertainty lingered as she recognized another crossroads on her journey towards independence. But the resolve was there, pulsating through her very core. As she patted her resume tucked safely in her bag, a slow exhale escaped her lips. This was only the beginning, and the next chapter awaited her. But would the confrontation with Hank expose who she truly was? Or would he reveal the cracks in her newfound armor? The air grew thick as silence cloaked the diner, the ambiance now saturated with tension that threatened to erupt at any moment. Sarah's heart pounded steadily, each beat echoing her resolve. She concentrated on the flickering neon light reflected in the polished tabletop, a reminder that clarity often emerges from the chaos of uncertainty. "Let's talk about your future, then." Hank leaned forward, his confidence resurfacing, though she could see the undercurrent of desperation beneath his guise. "You think that this, whatever this is, will set you free? You're leaving so much behind." Sarah held her ground, feeling the remnants of her vulnerability dissolve. "Not behind, Hank. I'm moving forward." The words tasted different on her tongue, empowered and resolute. They marked the foundation she intended to build upon, defining a vision unclouded by his shadow. "Forward into what?" he challenged, tone edged with skepticism. "A job you're not even sure about? Running headfirst into something you can't anticipate?" She took a breath, steadying herself against the tide of doubt he sought to unleash. "It's not about certainty but vision. I have plans, goals, aspirations. It's about creating a life where I'm in control of my journey, where I dictate what growth is for me." "Goals don't pay your bills," he countered, a smooth veneer of his former charm attempting to resurface. But it no longer swayed Sarah. Instead, she could perceive it as a reflection of his own insecurities, his need for validation and control, making it increasingly apparent why she had felt suffocated before. Maybe not, but they provide direction, and I have found a direction I am excited to pursue. The spark ignited a flicker of discomfort in Hank's expression. The realization that he no longer commanded the room unsettled him. "What about us, Sarah? We were good together. Don't you miss that?" The question, vulnerable but tinged with desperation, was an attempt to salvage some semblance of their past. "That was the illusion, and I refuse to live in it," she responded, her voice a steady cadence amidst the emotional storm. "Understanding that we were good together was my delusion. You were my comfort zone, not my destination." For the first time, a semblance of defeat crossed Hank's features, an unwelcome vulnerability in the battle for control. The confidence he perpetuated now seemed orchestrated, a facade cracking under the weight of honesty she had mustered. "What would you do if I didn't let you leave?" The question was a bold confrontation, a test of her resolve. "Then I'd find a way out," she replied without hesitation. The conviction behind her words lingered in the confined space, radiating a newfound fire that coursed through her veins. This conversation, this moment, she wasn't merely defending her choices, she was seizing her independence. A fleeting glance exchanged between them revealed the yarn of their intertwined past. One spun with manipulation was unwinding in audacious defiance. Beneath it all, Sarah recognized a potent truth. She possessed the autonomy to break free, not just from Hank, but from the shackles of self-doubt that had bound her for too long. Emboldened, she pushed her chair back, clattering metal breaking the stunned silence. "I'm not waiting for you to dictate my future or my identity. This is my life, and I'll choose how to live it." Each word cascaded with intention. She was not merely speaking, she was reclaiming ownership of her own narrative. Hank's expression hardened as reality washed over him. The man she had once known became but a ghost of the power he used to wield, leaving behind merely shadows of intimidation. Yet she knew better than to underestimate the capabilities forged from emotional manipulations. "Don't think this is over, Sarah," he warned, an edge creeping back into his tone, raising the stakes in their rivalry. The implication resonated in her core, but she met it with a calm clarity. "I'm counting on it." And with that, confidence rolled through her like waves on a shore, affirming an understanding about her own power that she had not fully comprehended until this moment. As she stepped away, the weight on her chest lifted, the din of the diner enveloping her like a warm embrace. But that exhilaration came tethered to new anxieties. Could this newfound strength withstand the inevitable pushback? The path forward unfolded with its own challenges, and the world outside felt vast and daunting. What would the repercussions be? Was Hank truly done, or was this only the beginning of a more intense confrontation? Clutching her resume, that symbol of her next chapter, she braced herself for whatever would follow, her heart pounding with both fear and determination. The journey ahead wasn't guaranteed to be smooth, but she was ready to embrace every twist and turn it would bring. The question lingered at the forefront of her mind. How far was she willing to go to defend her newfound freedom? The answers awaited her on the horizon, demanding exploration and the courage to face whatever lay beneath the surface. The warmth of the diner faded as Sarah stepped outside, the chill of the night air sharp against her skin. It felt invigorating, a stark contrast to the knot of tension that had been coiling inside her moments earlier. Each rapid breath carried the echo of her confrontation with Hank, a reminder of her newfound resolve. But as she moved away from that familiar setting, a different weight settled upon her. The uncertainty of her next steps loomed larger than ever. With a firm grip on her resume, she thought about that job interview scheduled for tomorrow. Memories of her previous role surfaced like flickering shadows, reinforcing her awareness of past failures and the tendency to doubt her own abilities. She had spent years working under someone else's vision, adhering to a routine that stifled her creativity and sense of agency. Now, every prospect ahead seemed riddled with obstacles, each one a reminder of the potential for missteps. Taking a moment to collect her thoughts, she leaned against the cool metal of a nearby lamppost, staring into the night sky. The stars, so bright and distant, felt similar to her ambitions, beautifully out of reach, yet existing just beyond the horizon. What if she failed again? What if her courage was not enough to sustain this bold leap? A surge of determination silenced the doubts bubbling in her mind. She would mold her future, shape it through action and tenacity. The experience at the diner had left her invigorated. There was power in knowing she had confronted someone who had once loomed so large in her life. That empowerment whispered of possibilities. As she began walking again, Sarah's thoughts shifted to the interview. What if this role could really turn her neatly contained world inside out? The prospect excited her. The vision of working in a dynamic environment where she could contribute her perspectives and ideas filled her with a sense of purpose. It was an opportunity for a fresh start, a chance to prove to herself that she could succeed on her own terms. Her pace quickened as she envisioned herself sitting across a table from the hiring manager, articulating her ideas with confidence, but doubt still nagged at her. Was she articulate enough? Would her past work experience translate into a new industry? Each question felt like a hurdle, yet she had to overcome them. The urge to retreat to old habits flickered in her mind. For the first time, Sarah actively sought the path of transformation rather than waiting for it to manifest. She pulled her phone out of her pocket and opened a note-taking app where she had stored her ideas for the job. Each goal she had penned glimmered like the stars above, a litany of ambitions, aspirations, and actionable steps toward her intended future. What if she dedicated the evening to preparing, researching the company, its culture, and the specifics of the role? She could also practice articulating her thoughts out loud. Their flow would help build her confidence. The small solitude of her apartment could serve as a creative base for this transformation she yearned to enact. As she settled into her living room later, surrounded by notes and articles, the chaotic energy of the diner gradually transformed into an overwhelming sense of purpose. She found herself rehearsing responses, projecting poise into the quiet space, recounting stories that highlighted her achievements rather than her inadequacies. Flashes of former colleagues and mentors flickered through her mind, each one reminding her of strengths she often downplayed. Hours passed in eager focus, the fear subsiding under her acute sense of preparation. Yet, amid the satisfying stream of thoughts, an uneasy feeling remained in the background, a shadow of unresolved tension tethered to her last encounter with Hank. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, leaning into the realization that facing him was merely the beginning. Perhaps his words, once laden with doubt, might haunt her, but she would not allow them to derail this momentum. Suddenly, her phone buzzed, pulling her back from introspection. It was a new message, a notification from a social media platform. Curiosity piqued, she opened it. The screen displayed Hank's unsent text from earlier, feigning the innocence of a distant cordiality. But this was merely a flicker, a thread connecting two disparate lives, now unraveling with intention. With renewed clarity, she understood that this emerging independence meant integrating both her professional ambitions and personal boundaries into a cohesive narrative. Tomorrow, she would present not only her qualifications, but also the unwavering strength forged through recent confrontation and a deep commitment to growth. The night was far from over, but as she prepared for sleep, a question lingered on her mind. How would she balance her aspirations with the fallout that still crept close behind? The stark reality of Hank's impending presence formed a storm in the distance, and Sarah braced herself for a revelation she knew was coming, one that could illuminate her path or shatter her resolve. A sliver of sunlight crept through the blinds, pulling Sarah from a restless sleep filled with fragmented dreams and nagging worries. The weight of her impending interview settled on her chest like a heavy blanket, and she struggled to find the strength to rise. Today was the day she would redefine her narrative. Either solidify her independence or let it slip away amid uncertainty. She moved through her morning routine mechanically, each gesture infused with an underlying anxiety. Her heart thumped in her chest, each beat a reminder of the stakes involved. Standing in front of the mirror, she studied her reflection, searching for the resolve she felt the night before. Yet a fissure of doubt threaded through her thoughts. What if she stumbled? Choosing her outfit was a deliberate act, and she opted for a tailored blouse that made her feel professional and empowered. As she slipped into her favorite blazer, she caught a glimpse of herself, blending strength with vulnerability. Today, she needed to embody both. On her way to the interview, she rehearsed phrases out loud, transforming her nervous energy into something tangible. She envisioned every word landing with impact, painting a picture of her professional identity she wished to portray. What if they asked about her past experiences? How would she articulate her growth? The rising tension morphed into clarity as she approached the building, its glass facade reflecting her anticipation. She took a deep breath and stepped inside, feeling the flicker of her heartbeat in sync with the ambient noise of footsteps and hushed conversations. The waiting room was abuzz with applicants, each one potentially competing against her for the same role. Anxiety swept over her as she scanned the faces around her, but then she caught sight of her handwritten notes poking through her bag, a tether to her intentions. She closed her eyes for a moment, grounding herself in her purpose. As her name was called, her nerves flared again, but she focused on the steps leading to the interview room. This was about more than just a job. It represented a transformation. Each step reinforced her decision to confront her fear head-on instead of recoiling. Upon entering, she faced the interview panel, a trio of seasoned professionals who sat with poised expressions. They examined her, and she felt exposed, but she anchored herself. She recalled the mental practice at home, and she summoned that energy to guide her. "Tell us about a challenge you've faced in your previous role," one interviewer asked. The question felt deceptively straightforward, yet it twisted her gut. Sarah hesitated, the specter of her past resurfaced. But then she channeled her memories, shaping them into learning experiences rather than failures. "I faced significant resistance while implementing a new project strategy," she began, her voice steadying. "Initially, I felt undervalued, but I learned to navigate dissent by fostering open dialogues and finding common ground." The panel members nodded, their expressions slightly shifting, and a spark of confidence ignited within her. As the interview unfolded, she shared her vision and innovative ideas, each response solidifying the narrative of her growth. She noticed that her passion for the role spilled over into her delivery. She was no longer just presenting herself as a candidate, but as a contributor eager to bring fresh perspectives. But as the session reached its conclusion, another question surfaced from one of the interviewers. "How do you deal with criticism, especially when it comes from someone significant in your life?" The inquiry struck a nerve, prying open a wound that had begun to heal but never fully closed. Her thoughts flashed to Hank, his shadowy words still echoing in her mind, but she refused to let his influence govern her anymore. "I believe criticism can be constructive, and I've learned to evaluate the intent behind it," she responded. "However, I'm also aware of my worth and recognize when to cultivate healthy boundaries." The admission resonated, and she sensed a shift in the room's atmosphere. The panel appeared impressed by her assertiveness. As she exited the building, triumphant and shaken, Sarah felt something inside her shift. Regardless of the outcome of the interview, she realized she had taken significant steps towards claiming her identity. Yet as she stepped out into the bustling street, an unsettling thought lingered. Hank would undoubtedly find ways to sway her ambitions again. Her triumph felt precarious, teetering on a threshold lined with past entanglements. Walking out of the building, she felt the city sprawling before her, bustling, chaotic, brimming with possibility. At that moment, she understood. Every choice she made could either shape her future or bind her to the past. Tomorrow, she would confront not only her new role, but also the lingering echoes of Hank, a battle she realized she had long waited for, one that would demand a far greater understanding of her worth than anything else she had faced. What awaited her in the days ahead? As she moved onward, a certainty began to unfurl within her, one woven with threads of confrontation and hope. Unbeknownst to Sarah, the real test of her strength was yet to come, as realizations about her relationship with Hank simmered just beneath the surface, ready to boil over into uncharted territory. The following morning, the air felt different as Sarah stepped out of her apartment. There was an electric charge around her, hinting at both possibility and challenge. Today was not just another day, it was a test. The unresolved thoughts about her interview swirled in her mind, but she forced herself to channel that uncertainty into determination. She had won over the panel, but the depth of her success remained intertwined with the ghosts of her past. Hank's voice drummed in her mind, a reminder of the fear that had once dictated her choices. She resolved to confront those shadows, no longer allowing them to dictate her worth or her ambitions. At the co-working space where she had taken refuge to recenter herself, Sarah staked her claim. She chose a communal table, large enough for collaboration, yet isolated enough to feel like her own. The atmosphere pulsed with creativity, a backdrop for her intentions. Today, she would map out her objectives, sketching a blueprint not only for her career but for her evolving identity. Opening her laptop, she pulled up a document titled Vision and Goals. It was more than a professional outline, it was a manifesto of her aspirations. As she typed, ideas flowed fluidly onto the screen. Projects she wished to champion, values she wanted to uphold, and methods to ensure she fostered personal growth along the way. Yet, even as she began to draft her vision, doubt crept in. Would she be able to execute these plans despite Hank's pervasive influence? The notion made her stomach churn, but she persisted. The truth was that Hank's past criticism had not just been noise, it had festered into various levels of self-doubt, curtailing her potential. But she understood now that his measures to limit her had only sparked her deepest growth and resolve. As her focus sharpened, she began to examine the skills she had honed through her varied experiences. Collaboration, strategic thinking, and most importantly, resilience had become integral to who she was. Each keystroke empowered her, igniting forgotten memories of her strong-willed self, a self that had the ability to overcome. The session was interrupted when a notification pinged on her screen. It was an email from the interview committee. Her hands trembled as she opened it, her heart racing with anticipation. "Dear Sarah," it began, "we appreciate your time and the insights you shared." Her breath hitched as she read the words, filling her with exhilaration that swiftly twisted into apprehension. They were impressed, but the job was not yet confirmed. This was merely the first step. They requested a follow-up meeting to discuss her potential contributions to the team. Endless possibilities danced before her, moments of jubilation intertwined with panic. This next encounter set the stage for more or less than what she hoped, another chance to prove her worth or another test of her resolve to break free of Hank's sway. Every moment that passed felt weighted with anticipation, propelling her to make a decisive move. Could she assert her autonomy without the intrusive thoughts of that past relationship poisoning her perspective? Would confronting Hank in the context of her professional's choices empower her, or engulf her in chaos? In the days leading up to the meeting, she committed herself to preparation, practicing responses and envisioning assertive interactions. Yet, amidst this growth, she felt the challenge of fear, a lurking question stubbornly hanging on. How would she create boundaries without being cold? That evening, as she gazed out at the skyline from her window, a thought anchored within her. Perhaps this moment was not just about the job itself, but about the foundational values she intended to build her life upon. Sarah knew this was where the conflict boiled down to choice. Choice imposed by others, or choice she could seize for herself. The upcoming meeting became a defining moment, a crucial point at which she could unfold her narrative privately and publicly. It was time to confront what held her back. The fear began to crystallize into clarity. This struggle would be hers to navigate and define, balancing her ambition, self-worth, and past entanglements. Was she ready to confront everything she had once accepted, but was no longer willing to endure? A determination hummed within her, intertwining with the ongoing revelations about her empowerment trajectory. The moment for reckoning was approaching fast, and Sarah could feel the walls she had erected start to tremble. Tomorrow, she would not just confront the panel about her professional future, she would also begin dismantling the remnants of her past. The confrontation with Hank was looming, a welling storm just waiting for release. A chilling thrill coursed through her. Her ultimate transformation awaited, just beyond the horizon. The sun rose with an exaggerated vigor, illuminating the quiet streets that had been warped by the shadows of fear and doubt for too long. Sarah Thompson stood at the edge of her new beginnings, bolstered by the decisions that had brought her to this moment. Today, she was not just stepping into an interview, she was reclaiming her life, her voice, and her vision of the future. As she dressed and adorned herself with confidence, she felt a sense of purpose that had eluded her until now. Each article she slipped on transformed into armor. Today, she would not be overshadowed by the suffocating influence of her past or the nemesis that was Hank. She had conquered the past week's turmoil, rising from its ashes but imbued with a newfound clarity. No longer was she trapped in the entanglement of expectations. She was ready to define her path. The familiar streets leading to the building where her interview awaited felt different, less daunting, more inviting. The trepidation that had quaked beneath her skin had evolved into anticipation, almost like butterflies transforming into soaring birds. The intricate web of her ambitions began to reveal itself. After arriving, her previous self-doubts faded to a distant memory as the interviewers invited her into the room. The trio sat waiting, screens and papers in hand as they turned toward her. Sarah anchored herself in the moment, remembering the strength she had built and the sacrifices that had forged her into who she was now. With unwavering eyes, she began to share her vision and her journey, articulating her hard-won resilience and passion for wildlife conservation. The questions flowed seamlessly, each one a stepping stone that illuminated her unique perspective. Sarah spoke with conviction about the projects she had initiated in her previous positions, framing them as explorations that had defined her professional identity. She discussed overcoming resistance, emphasizing the collaborative efforts that had led to triumph, and shared her newfound conviction in the importance of boundaries. When the interview culminated, Sarah felt elation bubbling within her. She had not only answered questions, she had conveyed who she was, a vibrant, capable woman driven by purpose. It was as though an unseen weight had lifted from her shoulders, clearing her mind and empowering her spirit with every word exchanged. Yet beneath this exhilaration lay an eddy of worry feeding on Hank's presence in her life. Would he resist? Would his intimidation make one last desperate attempt to suffocate her transformation? The reality of their impending confrontation would demand all the resolve she had cultivated. After a fruitful exchange with the panel, they concluded with applause for her vibrant energy and ideas. "We'd love to invite you back for a second round," one interviewer said, beaming. The words washed over her like a healing rain, validation through and through. But the fight was not over, and although she felt empowered, she had to continue to fortify her newfound confidence against Hank's persistent shadow. In that moment, she saw clearly that the journey toward professional dignity intertwined intricately with a personal reckoning. She needed to confront Hank, not just as an adversary but symbolically, to demolish the constraints he had placed upon her. As evening approached, Sarah prepared for the climax of her transformation. She could feel her heart beating, anticipation and fear swirling together. The sun sank low, casting an orange hue across the horizon, heralding the duality of endings and beginnings. The air crackled with energy as she approached the farmhouse, each step marking her resolve to strip away the chains of the past. When she arrived, Hank stood at the entrance, his aura of control palpable, yet Sarah carried herself with poise. The faint echoes of the powerful woman she had been in the interview resonated within her, propelling her to confront the darkness fearlessly. "Hank," she began, steady as granite, "it's time for us to have a serious conversation." The weight of her words lingered heavily in the air. "What now?" he replied, attempting to regain his dominance, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "I'm not here to relive the past. I've regained my power, and I refuse to allow you to dictate my choices any longer. The contract you wielded as a weapon no longer binds me. My life is no longer for you to control." Shock rippled through Hank's posture, the facade of authority faltering. Each word she delivered matched the pulse of her heart, resilient, unwavering, true. "I've spent enough time questioning my value because of you," she continued, the energy radiating from her igniting the space. "Today, I applied for a role that reflects who I want to be. I have dreams that don't include the past we shared. I'm moving forward with my life." The confrontation unfolded like a carefully handled proposal. She witnessed Hank's facade break, revealing his vulnerability and confusion. His reign was crumbling. For once, she was free from the oppressive gravity he once exerted upon her. "Do you really think you can just walk away? That you can rebuild without facing the repercussions?" he scoffed. "Yes, because I'm no longer the girl who believed your threats held any truth," she countered. "I've transformed. I'm not defined by my past mistakes or your words. I'm defined by my aspirations." With that, Sarah stepped away, solidified confidence surging through her veins. She was ready to embrace the life she yearned for, the dreams that awaited, no longer tethered by restraint or fear. As she left the farmhouse, she inhaled deeply, savoring the first of what felt like true freedom. She was no longer a shadow in someone else's story. She was the author of her own. The horizon glimmered with possibilities, and Sarah felt a sense of belonging to herself, to her aspirations, to a life where she was truly open to whatever came next. It was clear that victory was not just in the words shared with Hank, but in the clarity of purpose she had carved for herself. The ache of her past had dulled, replaced by anticipation of the exciting journey ahead, driven by conviction and passion. The future was hers to mold and define, and with that realization, Sarah Thompson stepped boldly into it. And you need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that follow extraordinary journeys of transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support for these incredible narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about endings that emphasize personal growth and empowerment. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to spread the message. This is the moment to embrace the strength that lies within.